How close are we to developing usable exoskeleton suits? What are the differences between the main types of exoskeleton gear and integrated systems? And lastly, what are the factors that are limiting our integration with cyberware? Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. My name's Dr. Maddie, your doctor from the UK. And in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the boxing anime Megalobox. We're going to be following the journey of Gearless Joe as he takes on several Megalobox fighters to become the #1 champion. And for those of you who haven't seen this show, spoiler warning ahead. Otherwise, with that being said, let's begin.
Hey, partner. Did you come all the way here to pick me up? Oh, you're such a sweetheart.
Screw that garbage! I told you, I'm sick and tired of throwing these damn fights!
Okay, so in this first scene, we're introduced to our main characters. We've got Joe, the boxer, and Nanbu, his manager. And we find out straight off the bat that Nanbu's using Joe to rig fights to make money to help pay off the mob. Now, unfortunately, this is quite accurate, as the sport of boxing has a notorious history of corruption, scandal, and controversy around the rigging of fights.
Making his first appearance at the Drunk Mug, Chug Dog! And our headliner, Gedo Hachiya! This is tonight's main event!
Okay, so here we're seeing Joe's gear for the first time, and it looks like it's an exoskeleton that you wear rather than it being an integrated system. Now, the difference between the two is that an exoskeleton is a wearable robotic system with onboard computers that manage a system of motors, pneumatics, hydraulics and gears to help augment your movements. Whereas an example of an integrated system would be something like what David wore in the Cyberpunk Edge Runner series that is more integrated with your anatomy. And taking a closer look at Joe's exoskeleton suit, it looks like it's something that he needs to carry rather than it being supported by its own weight. The obvious disadvantage of this is that it's definitely going to slow down the boxer, thereby reducing your agility in throwing and dodging punches.
If the kid wasn't wasting away in this hole, he might have had a shot at the big time. I'm talking about Megalonia. Just getting in scores you some glory, but the championship purse would set you up for life.
So this looks like an opportunity for both Joe and Nanbu to get out of their current circumstance of having to pay off the mob. It's funny because this anime kind of reminds me of the underdog story of Rocky Balboa if he found himself in the real Steel universe. What do you guys think?
You trying to die?
You're going to take back those words.
You the one that's gonna make me?
So here we're introduced to the main antagonist of this story, Yuri. Now, he's the poster child of the Shiroto organization, who have just recently developed a new integrated gear system, which differs quite significantly from the exoskeleton suit, but we'll have a look at that shortly. Now, it'll be Yuri from here on out who acts as the main form of motivation to improve Joe's boxing style and get him into Megalonia. It seems like every great anime have a pair like this. Let me know your favourites down below.
Me and that stray dog have got some unfinished business.
Holy crap! That must be Shiroto's integrated gear!
Aw, it's like a second skin! That's some amazing tech!
So here we're seeing Yuri's integrated gear for the first time, and it would be interesting to hear how it's integrated with his anatomy. My understanding of how gear or an exoskeleton actually works is that it senses your own body's muscular contraction and then augments this through the exoskeleton shell to give you additional power. Therefore, the closer that sensor is to your muscles, the shorter the delay there is between your muscular contraction and the exoskeleton's reaction. And it looks like Yuri's gear has taken this into account by almost having it fused to his skin.
That's a hell of a jab. If it had been a clean hit, then...
Okay, if we have a look at a side-by-side comparison of Joe's gear to Yuri's, we can see that Joe's is far more clunky and bulky. And this is because Joe's got all of these pneumatics and hydraulics at his articular joints. Now, the obvious advantage of this is that it's going to give you additional power. However, because the joints look so articulated, it looks like it might limit his range of movement and therefore his agility when throwing punches. And so the first head-to-head of Joe and Yuri ends in a knockout. And what we see here is the ability of Yuri's gear to be able to move more closely to that of your normal human joints. And this is due to its more humanoid structure, allowing Yuri to redirect attacks in the dimensions that the joints are normally able to move within. Whereas if we look at Joe's gear, because it's far heavier, it's harder for him to throw a punch and then quickly defend himself against a far more agile opponent.
There we go. Now all we need is a new name and we'll have a freshly minted citizen.
It's your name. You pick it.
Okay then. Joe.
Really, it's such a crime that this anime is so underrated. You can tell the efforts that the writers have gone through, from how they've drawn the anime, to the choice in music, all the way through to the science behind the exoskeletons and gears that are used in this series. I'd 100% recommend if you haven't seen it already.
That contender is none other than the second-ranked fighter, Pepe the Spider. What a Megaloboxing Titans! Experts say that Yuri has the advantage, but Pepe's recent string of wins have shown some remarkable...
Second round.
So here we're seeing that Yuri's wearing an anaerobic mask, and these have been designed to simulate anaerobic conditions when you're working out. Now yes, these are a real thing, and they've been designed to improve your anaerobic performance and improve your cardiovascular conditioning. I do have to mention, however, that these are alleged benefits rather than having anything proven, so please use these with caution.
How's the new gear feel? It ought to be twice as powerful as before. Hell, 3 times maybe.
Yeah, it's got more power, but the added weight is gonna put strain on his arms.
Yes, so this touches on a really important point, which is your power to weight ratio. Just because someone's heavier than you doesn't mean that they're a better fighter. For example, if you've ever seen a heavyweight fight, you'll find that they're leaning on one another far more than what you'll find in the lightweight division. And that's because throwing around that additional weight is far more taxing on your body. And so although adding more weight to your exoskeleton structure will give you more power, it also makes it heavier for the boxer to carry and therefore has the side effect of slowing them down and being more taxing on their body.
Did you forget about the battery? If you try and push it any harder, you'll burn it out.
Oh, that's just perfect. I've really screwed up now.
I thought you were upgrading it, not frying it to a crisp!
Oh, shut up!
So it looks like the more powerful exoskeleton suit has placed too high a demand on the batteries, causing them to burn out. Really, I can't see there being a real-life solution for overcoming this battery issue, but it might be worth designing a full-body exoskeleton suit so that it can help to distribute all of that weight of the gear over the boxer's body rather than just on their backs.
I'm gonna destroy you!
You can try.
What are you doing in there? Fight back!
So with Joe's exoskeleton suit being completely fried, he had no other choice than to become Gearless Joe. And although from the outset it might look like Joe's now at a great disadvantage, it actually just comes down to how good of a boxer Joe really is. You see, an exoskeleton suit in matches like this doesn't really give you any defensive advantage. In fact, it makes you far more vulnerable as it's harder for you to keep up your guard. So long as Joe can stay away from any heavy punches, he's got the agility to get on the inside and deliver a knockout blow.
You can't move the way you usually do, can you? Feels like you're all tied up, right? Your brain is telling your body that it's afraid.
Yes, so what's going on here is Joe's going through the fight or flight response. You see, he's never gone up against someone with no gear, and so fighting on these terms is something completely new for his body. And it's because he's uncertain of his abilities that he feels under threat. And it's this that triggers your body to release adrenaline to allow you to escape from this threatening environment.
That rhythm that we drilled into you. Don't let him lead out there. You gotta make him dance with you. Do it now!
So this is Joe's first win, and what Nanbu was getting at in terms of rhythm is something very unique to boxing. A boxer's rhythm comes down to the tempo or the pattern of movements that a boxer uses during a fight. And the way a boxer goes about developing this is through a relentless amount of footwork drills, shadow boxing and sparring with opponents. The more adept a boxer is with this rhythm, the more likely they are going to be successful in the ring.
Aragaki was a soldier, right? It says here that he lost both his legs in an explosion while he was in combat on the front lines. Looks like he was missing in action for a while. but he was eventually found and returned home a year later.
Okay, so next we see that Joe's next opponent is one of Nanbu's ex-students, who unfortunately had his legs blown off when he was in the war. And it looks like he's had those legs replaced with prosthetics rather than their own unique gear system. In fact, these look like the types of prosthetics that amputees would be offered in real life.
What exactly are you aiming for? I thought you wanted to enter Megalonia with the legs that gave you your life back, to prove yourself. If that's the goal, then you should cancel this match right now.
Yeah, so just because you don't have any lower legs doesn't mean that you don't need to work out the muscles that remain. If you don't, these will atrophy and reduce your mobility further. Really, I think people underestimate how quickly your body can lose muscle. Some studies have shown that every week spent in bed, immobile, you lose up to 4% of your muscle mass. So if you've sustained an injury, this is why it's important to keep moving. Yeah, so it looks like Aragaki was suffering from PTSD after returning from the war, to the point where he was suicidal. And unfortunately, this was fairly common for those soldiers that were returning from the Vietnam War. Remember that people suffering from PTSD have uncontrollable flashbacks to the events of trauma and describe that they can actually experience the same pain that they went through during that event. It sounds really unbearable, right?
50-50. Split it evenly. That's enough! Shut the hell up!
So it looks like even Aragaki had a vulnerable point, as he takes a direct blow to the chin. And the reason that this is so effective in causing a KO is that the force is transmitted around the skull, causing the brain to shake inside the skull. Really, it would be as if someone was taking your head and shaking it back and forth. You can imagine that this would be disorientating to the point where you might lose your balance and fall to your knees.
Okay.
So it looks like Aragaki's knees were painful from where the prosthetic limbs attached. And depending on whether he's got stumps under those prosthetics will help to determine the cause for his pain. And what I mean by this is that some amputees after their surgery are left with a stump that sits in a cup and sock that attaches to their prosthetic limb. Whereas other amputees might have something called Osteointegration, whereby a titanium rod is placed through the femur and part of it sticks out at the end of the stump, which is what attaches to their prosthetic limb.
So you were injured?
Yeah. The doctor said I risked being bedridden for the rest of my life by pushing it so hard up there.
So it looks like Aragaki has osteointegration, whereby his prosthetic is attached to that titanium rod. Now the problem with this device and being a boxer is that by taking repeated blows, it could cause this titanium rod to displace or cause what we call a periprosthetic fracture, whereby the bone breaks around that titanium rod. Now, if that does occur, some people might need further surgery, but if the fracture is extensive, they may never be able to walk again.
My sources tell me Aragaki was quite brutal. Your fighter's too injured to box anyone in his condition.
So here we see that Joe is peeing blood after his fight with Aragaki, and this could be for a number of different reasons. The first could be due to direct trauma to your kidneys, that can often be a cause for blood in your urine. The second could be something called rhabdomyolysis, and this occurs after muscular damage whereby some of that muscular tissue leaks into your bloodstream and clogs up your kidneys. As a result, this can lead to kidney failure and also blood in your urine. Now, both of these conditions would need hospitalization for treatment, but it doesn't look like Gearless Joe has any time for that.
That AI gear of his probably determines the most energy-effective attacks and defenses, given what's going on in the match.
In other words, the gear is calling the shots and not Mikio.
Okay, so it looks like the main difference in Mikio's gear is that he has an AI system on board. However, it doesn't look like that AI system is directly integrated into Mikio's body or his central nervous system. And what that means is that Mikio and the AI system make their own separate decision as to how they'd respond in a fight. So really, it's only both when their decisions are the same and synchronized that they get the most out of using this type of gear.
Mikio's ace can't predict a fighter without gear. He's straight up afraid of you, Joe. He didn't want to face a fighter that doesn't wear gear. I would have never guessed, but now he got an edge.
Ah, okay, so that's a really big flaw in Mikio's design of this gear. I'm guessing that the way that this gear currently works is that the AI system is able to analyze the opponent's gear and then calculate the various ways in which it might maneuver, and thereby generate a counterattack for any one of those. Whereas if the opponent is a human body, its maneuverability is only limited by the boxer's talent, meaning that there are limitless forms of attack that the AI just won't be able to calculate. Clearly, this makes Gearless Joe the worst form of opponent for this type of AI system.
Alright then, let's get going.
I remember you telling us before that having strong footing makes for stronger punches, right? So we tried helping out with that.
Yes, so this is very true. The amount of power that a boxer is able to generate does come down to his footing, as well as the amount of torque he's able to generate in twisting when throwing that punch. So heavy leg training will help to develop the foundations to allow Joe to deliver more power when he's punching an opponent.
Raise automatic control to 50%.
Maximum output. Synchronization dropping.
So it looks like a major limitation of Mikio being able to synchronize with his gear is actually his physical body, keeping up with the decisions that the AI gear is making. In fact, we actually see him here taking a drug, which I presume is adrenaline, to allow him to keep up with the gear's decisions. Now, if this were adrenaline in this vial that he ends up injecting, then it would give him superhuman abilities for a very short window of time. But unfortunately, it wouldn't give him any long-term benefits and could possibly go against his health if he used it in the long term.
There you go. His gear doesn't recognize that pattern yet. That thing may be able to read it, but if it doesn't have any data to work with...
Good thing Ace is a fast learner.
So it looks like Mikio was able to upgrade his AI system to be able to keep up with a Gearless Joe. And it looks like one of its new functions is that it can actually learn during a live fight. Now, this isn't too dissimilar from how the brain would actually work during a boxing match. However, the AI system is able to learn at a far quicker rate than the human brain, meaning that you don't need to take so much damage to learn how your opponent fights. Really, with the speed at which we've seen chatbots and AI develop over the last few years, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something like this in the not too distant future.
What in the hell? Synchronization is at 90%. And rising.
Joe, what the hell are you doing? Get your guard up! Block, you gotta block!
So here we see that Mikio is almost at 100% synchronization with the AI system, meaning that his physical body is roughly able to keep up with the AI system's demands. However, because Joe drops his guard, and this is a move that the AI system hasn't seen before, it's overly cautious rather than taking advantage of this opening that Joe's created, which highlights another limitation of the AI's binary way of thinking.
Is this what Ace wants? Or is it me?
Right there!
So it looks like the inner conflict between Mikio and the AI gear finally leads to his downfall. I guess this really demonstrates the major disadvantage with using an AI system with a human operating it. And it was Mikio's trust in this gear and wanting to blindly follow it that ultimately ended up in his downfall. So ultimately, Gearless Joe advances and he's going to be in the final against Yuri.
After an internal audit, we've discovered that the design data for key components in the integrated gear were procured in an unorthodox manner. It seems certain that the original developer of the immunosuppressant mechanism was the boy's father.
Okay, so it looked like Yuri needed to be taking immunosuppressants to keep this gear in check. And what this tells me is that his gear was likely integrated into his nervous system and possibly into his muscles as well. Now what happens when new tissues enter your body is that your immune system reacts and causes an immune response. This immune reaction attacks the new cells, trying to eliminate them from your body. And so the purpose of taking an immunosuppressant is to actually dull down this response to allow you to accept whatever these new tissues might be. However, one of the big disadvantages of immunosuppressants is that it dampens your immunity to the point where your body can't mount a response to even common infections, turning something from a trivial infection to potentially something that's life-threatening.
This is the bare minimum of what we need.
Let's get started right away.
And you're sure? You've thought it through? Remember, the integrated gear is a part of your body now. I can't promise it can be removed safely.
Okay, so Yuri's made the brave and potentially dangerous decision to have his gear removed to fight Joe. And depending on how integrated it was into his anatomy, it might cause irreparable damage to his muscles, nervous tissue and bones, which would obviously go against him when fighting Joe. So the procedure was predictably painful, with both his motor and sensory fibres being torn out of his muscles, disrupting his nervous system. And it's interesting how they've illustrated Yuri's pain with these red hot lines shooting through his body, as many patients that I talk to with neuropathic pain describe it as though it's like electric shocks shooting through their limbs. Or like being stabbed with a red hot poker, which looks like how they've illustrated it in this scene.
After the pain and loss of stamina from the surgery, if he sits, he won't be able to stand, so he's staying on his feet. This was his call. Let's see how it plays out.
So during his fight with Joe, Yuri is choosing not to sit down when in his corner, and Joe's side interprets this as though he's not being challenged during the rounds. However, Mikio tells us that due to the significant damage with removing his gear, that if Yuri were to sit down, he may well never be able to stand up again. This makes me think that his gear was integrated into his spinal cord, a bit like the Sandavistan system from the Cyberpunk Edgerunners universe. And it looks like in removing this, it's caused weakness and potentially could go on to cause paralysis in his lower limbs. And we see a glimpse of this as he begins to drop the bottle when he's in his corner. Could this possibly be Yuri's last fight of his career?
We're lucky, Joe. Truly lucky to have found one another.
I'm here. I'm in the moment I've lived for.
And so it comes to the final blows in the fight, and I love how they've illustrated this. It's very reminiscent of the Goku vs Vegeta fight. But we can also see the toll that the surgeries had on Yuri's body, with him having extensive scarring in his upper limb. Also, his eyes look pretty sunken, and he looks like a shell of the man that he was at the start of this anime. I think we can predict the outcome that Joe is going to win this fight.
Whether you wield the reins of power beneath a weighty crown, no man escapes death. But if you live life so that when it comes you're satisfied, you'll have no cause to fear mortality.
What a badass line to finish on, and fortunately he doesn't end up dying from this fight. We do see him in a later scene, but he's bound to a wheelchair, which tells me that his spinal cord had been irreparably damaged from removing his integrated gear. Okay guys, that's the end of today's video. Let me know what type of gear or exoskeleton you guys would choose. Or would you follow in the footsteps of Gearless Joe? Let me know down below. Otherwise, don't forget to drop this video a like, and if you're free just now, why not check out one of these two videos? As always, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.